During the month of June, I read whatever I felt like reading. I had no theme for my month, no theme for my TBR. So in today's video, let's get through some books. So hello my fellow fantasy book lovers and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi and welcome. My name is Kathy, I'm a goth girl from Belgium who loves to read fantasy books. In today's video I'm going to go through the books I read during the month of June, and the month of May was actually a dragon themed month, and during the month of June I didn't have a theme, but one of the books that I started reading in May actually passed over to June, and that is also the first book that I'm going to be talking about. And that book was Fireborne by Rosaria Munda. Now, whenever I started getting into fantasy reading again, Fourth Wing and Iron Flame were released, and one of the comparisons that was being made was that this trilogy is better than Fourth Wing, is different. So I picked this trilogy up out of curiosity. Now, I've read the first book, I still have book 2 and 3 to actually continue on. I will continue on it because I did really like the scene setting and the premises of book 1. We basically follow two main characters and the chapters kind of switch between those two. We have a female main character who is called Annie. She was an orphan, she was raised very poorly, and in this world that we have there is a class system with different metals indicating which class you belong to, and Annie and her friend Lee, who is the male main character for this book, have both been chosen to be in one of the highest tiers, which is the gold tier, and they are both dragon riders. So the class in which you are put through a sort of test that they do defines the rest of your life. Now, they were both raised as orphans, but Lee actually has a completely different background than Annie in becoming an orphan, and you will notice this throughout the book. In the start of this book, you will have the two main characters ready to embark in this contest to become the top rider of their class and to become the squadron leader type situation. So there's different types of dragons. There are 3 main types of dragons. There's also differences between those, which will be explained in the book. I really liked this. The only thing that I didn't like is that it was rather predictable to me. I did enjoy it, don't get me wrong, but I'm really looking forward to where it goes to in the next books. So if you're into YA fantasy with dragons, because there is some implied romantic content, but not between the two main characters, it is not as explicit as in Fourth Wing Iron Flame. There's some kissing and more happening, but it's just it's vaguely mentioned and then not described in depth. So this is definitely a YA series in my opinion. However, the dragons, the world building, the competition, the plot twists, I did really enjoy it, and I'm actually looking forward to reading book 2 and 3. The reason I give this book a 3 stars is because I wished it continued and that it was maybe if book 2 and 3, if I read them, those will be 5-star reads for me, but this was still scene setting, getting into the world, setting the characters, etc. I know it takes time, and I maybe wish it was done a little bit differently, and I also wish that the characters were a little bit more mature in some of their decision making. But yeah, all in all, I really enjoyed this book. If you're looking into similar books to Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, but you don't want to get into the overly hyped romantasy dragon smut, this is very good. This is really a recommendation for you. If you maybe tried reading Fourth Wing and you didn't like the amount of romantasy in it, then you will prefer this book, I'm sure. Up next, I read That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. I don't currently own this book anymore. Well, I still own it, it's still my book, but I actually borrowed it to a friend because I thought it was hilarious and I wanted her to read it as well. And this is your typical smutty fantasy romance book. There's no other way to describe it. It is light, it has some story to it, it has a little bit of depth to it, and this is for me the perfect balance of fantasy and romance. What I also really loved about this book is that the female main character, she is of a darker skin tone, she's not skinny, she's not 16 or 17 and beautiful and perfect. Well, she is beautiful, but not in the traditional classical way. And I really love that about this book. She's also really a badass. She stands up for herself. At the start of the book, I was a little bit like, she's really drinking a lot. What's going to happen? But then as the book evolves, you know that she is more than just a drunkard. However, the second book in this series is also That Time I Got Drunk and it's actually a series that's continuing on. So this is really like, this was my in-between read because I wanted something like after Fireborne, I wanted something light and easy. And I give it 5 stars because at the time I just wanted something light and easy and it fulfilled those needs. After that, I have the 2 books from my very early June trip to Waterstone. And these are book 2 and 3 in Court of Dragons series. So this is Court of Dragons and Vows, Court of Dragons and Ashes. It continues on the first book that is over here, which is Court of Dragons and Crowns. So these are 3 of the 5 apparently books it's gonna be. I truly hoped it was gonna be a trilogy. I read these books in an evening each, or like in an evening plus night each. I just couldn't stop reading them. I think what G. Bailey does with this, it's not purely fantasy romance. It is, of course, very romance heavy. The basic premises for these books is that we have our main female character, who I'm not going to talk too much in detail about. She is a not human girl, not entirely, and she is actually put into a contest to become one of the dragon's wives. So in the first book, there is a competition with 4 Dragon Kings. This is described as a Hunger Games type situation. It's not. It's simply a contest where there's a lot of girls and they need to survive certain challenges. And at the end, the ones who survive get to marry one of the Dragon Kings. So you have the Court of Air, Water, Fire, and Earth, and they are dragon shifters. So they can change from like a human form to a dragon form. So in book 1, at the end, something happens that I'm not going to talk about because it will spoil the entire reading experience. In book 2, we continue on what happens in book 1, and this is a why choose romance. So from the start, from just reading the blurb on the first book, you know that this girl is going to end up with all of them, and there's a lot of build-up, a lot of tension, a lot of things happening in between them. In book 2, it was really good for me. I loved book 2. Book 3, I felt was a little unnecessary in my opinion, but we'll see whenever I get my hands on book 4 and 5 what I think about it then. But if you are into dragon romance, then I think this is something that you will enjoy. I love myself a good fantasy romance, and these books for me just, yeah, I love them. I really enjoyed them. That's the reason why once I start reading these, I barely can stop reading them because it's so much fun. It's well written. This is not Shakespeare. This is not Tolkien type writing. This is just a good time in a book, and that's all I need sometimes. Up next is a book that is totally different than the smutty romantasy books that I've read, and it is When Among Crows. This book was actually recommended to me by Emily from Waterstones. It was like, it is so special, it is so unique, you have to read it. And this is actually a hardcover version. It has like a shiny thing on the cover and then spray painted edges, and it also has like this beautiful inside. The book itself is just very plain and it has a sword on it. But in this book, we actually follow a sort of mythological creature, but not from Greek mythology, from something completely different. This book really has like dark magic, darker myths into it. It is a very short read. Like I finished this in an evening, not even going into the night. Like I started reading this in my sofa, finished it in my sofa and then went to bed. So if you want something short, but that still has a complete story that leaves you fulfilled, I think this will be a good book for you. I actually gave this a 5 stars because it reintroduced that dark urban fantasy that I really like. Neverwhere is the book that started my love for fantasy and for this channel as well. And this book actually reminds me some sort of way of Neverwhere because it is like California combined with magic and with different elements in it, and I found this a beautiful, very well written book. And honestly, you'll have to read it for yourself to discover it. And the main character we follow is actually a sort of monster slayer, but he wants to help a monster, it appears, and then a twist takes place. Like if you read the little bit of blurb here at the front, then you will know what this book is about. It's exactly what it is about. But I found the writing style very nice and very fluid, and even if it's a very short book, I felt it didn't need more pages to tell its story. And then the final book that I finished during the month of June is actually Gideon the Ninth. I started this book in early June, almost DNF'd it, and then still went through with it and finished it. Gideon the Ninth is described as necromancers in outer space, and that is exactly what this is. We have Gideon, who lives on the 9th planet, hence Gideon the Ninth, and all of the planets, or all of the groups from these planets, are pulled into one big contest type situation, and the person who wins it will be like the ultimate necromancer of some sorts. So Gideon's planet has a necromancer. She's called Harrow, and Harrow is actually going with Gideon, and you will notice this very early on in the book, but Gideon doesn't really belong in the 9th, or at least she feels she doesn't belong. I found this book very confusing at first, I'm not gonna lie. It was a bit of a struggle to get into. I also felt at the end that there was like a big epic final battle. I felt it was dragged out way too long. I did love whenever they actually enter this contest, it is on a different planet in a sort of castle type situation. I really loved the investigation part, the discovering what is actually going on, and the fact that at the end of the book you still don't know 100% what is exactly going on. That leaves me wanting to read book 2. However, I already know that book 2 will also be a struggle from a friend of mine who has read it recently, because you start book 2 with the ending of book 1, and at the ending of book 1 there is some fight that happens and someone passes out, and apparently you start from that point of view of the person not really knowing what's going on. So you as a reader also don't know what's going on because you follow their point of view. And don't get me wrong, I will continue to read this series because necromancers and vampires are some of my favorite themes. However, I have different books like Sight from Neil Shusterman that also has like the necromancer theme going on, kind of, not really, but like a reaper theme. And I want to read maybe that book first, or see if there's different books that also have like necromancy happening. I know Ghostsmith, the second book to Bonesmith, also has it, so I would much rather pick up those books first than read Harrow the Ninth, but I will get to Harrow the Ninth someday. And this book, unfortunately, was one of my 5-star predictions, so whenever I make the update to that video, this was unfortunately not a 5-star for me. It was a 3-star, which means it was enjoyable, but it wasn't my favorite book ever, and I would not actively recommend it to anyone at this point. Feel free to let me know in the comments down below which books did you read during the month of June, which ones did you really like, and would you advise to me to look into? And of course, if you have read one of these books as well, what did you think of it? Do you agree with my opinion or not at all? I would love to know. Of course, feel free to give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it, and if you haven't already and you'd like to be, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I make new videos every week and I would love to have you for every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you very soon with a new video. Bye!